Growing up, it was as if I felt that I was kind of this black sheep. I was this bad kid because I wanted this freedom. I wanted this liberation. I was literally raised by a pack of matriarchs, and they were strong and they were bold. They're brash. A few of them super unapologetic. If you're dropping something really big and you expect them to be on your side right away, it's gonna take time. Because I remember when it was time for me to break the news that I wanted to sell my practice. It was so hard for my family to grasp. And they were like, "You want to throw this away for what?" They could not believe it. I had to rectify that those things were not for anybody else, but for me. And this was me individuating, literally going on my own path. In our hero's journey, we will have to step into the things that may piss other people off in order to find our true north, in order to find ourselves. And is it a bad thing? Hello, hello, Brave Table fam. Welcome to another episode of The Brave Table. I'm your host, Dr. Neeta, and this is your destination, your oasis to be all things just a little bit more brave. Brave in your actions, in your relationships, and in your life. And today, I want to brave a topic that I used to get asked all the time. And this is braving conversations with your elderly, whether it's your elderly caretakers, your elderly parents, your relatives, people who are close to you. Now, many of you probably, if you're new, you haven't probably heard of me talking about my bonus mama, my aunt, Bhua. And before I get into that, I wanted to pick a card, our affirmation card deck, if you're watching this on YouTube or Spotify. But to set the tone, and this is from my That Suck Now What affirmation card deck, I am the only one who determines what is and isn't right for me. I am the final say. I am the creator and director of my story. I just love when it hits. Wow. Okay. So it is true. And no matter whatever I share in today's conversation, because we are going to navigate how to have brave conversations with your elderly parents, but also what happens when they don't agree with whatever life path you're taking, what happens if they don't agree with the walk that you are deciding to walk in this season and stage of life. What happens then? When do you get to break up with a story in your mind about how you shall live or what you shall do? And this can come in some of the biggest moments in life, and maybe some of the everyday moments in life. And I want to start out by saying that the last few weeks have been kind of a little interesting. I just got back from another trip to India and Dubai, and I was actually visiting my hometown, Chicago. Shout out to Chi-Town love. And I haven't been back in a year and a half, and I have always gone back home, home, meaning Chicago, to visit family. I still have a ton of my family there. And now that I have my kids, I would love for them to be in a space that they are also with their cousins and, their second cousins, because I'm also very close to my cousins. And I grew up with several of my, cousins who I think that they're like my brothers and sisters. And that tends to happen in many Asian cultures. You just say that your brothers are your brothers, even if they are your first cousins or even your second cousins, just because you grow up in such close proximity. And I wanted to have that same experience for my kids. It's something that Ajit and we had discussed even early on. And, the other half of our family or Ajit's family is in India, and it's much closer to kind of go back to Chicago. And while we've hosted big family events in Texas, so everyone literally has come to Texas to visit us, and that's been really, really nourishing and really great. We just haven't been back to Chicago, and this was a beautiful trip to go back. And there were a lot of things that were, different. And I'm not talking about the city, and I know the city has changed, and that's another topic and another conversation for another day. Still love my Chi-town city, but I'm talking about the now relationship going back to visit my family. And a little bit about me for those who are just kind of joining. I lost my mom, my dad, and my brother before I was 19. And so the mama bears that I like to call mama bears or matriarchs of my family were really my aunts and my late grandmother, Lola Femi, who, shout out to my Filipino side. I say that I was literally raised by a pack of matriarchs and they were strong and they were bold. Some of them were Leos. I had Leo, Taurus, and Virgo mama bears that were my guiding stars. And in many ways, growing up, it was very tough to grow up with them. And I also think it has truly, genuinely made me who I am today. They were bold, they're brash. A few of them super unapologetic. If you've ever heard me talk about my bonus mama, my Bhua, um, she is she is that quintessential Punjabi bull, and um, and if you are not able to be okay and sovereign in your own confidence within yourself, you would probably get swallowed alive. And that was probably the early half of my life, um, where it was a lot of tough love. And I make and I poke a lot of fun on it, and I make a lot of jokes around it. But honestly, I've had to go through a ton of therapy, a ton. I mean, still to this day, um, I have, my elected healing squad that I go to for, full release of the some of the deep dark wounds that may still tend to surface. And I think that um it's a beautiful thing, and I also think we're kind of always healing something because we're kind of, we're unraveling like onion layers. And I also think I don't take as many things personally as I did growing up. And and I think also this was a big pivotal point for me, the very first time I was stepping away from listening to everything that my elders had said and using their word as like the word of God. And I know that many times when we're growing up in collective or collectivist cultures, or where it's really hard to individuate, and when we get into before our Saturn return or around that time, or when we get into college, or when we start to individuate and leave our homes for the first time, we then start to see that light. We see the glimmer of light. But then when you go back home, you kind of regress to that dynamic where you're that 14-year-old girl or that 16-year-old boy or that, 7-year-old kid who just wanted to be loved, who wanted to be appreciated, who wanted to be seen. And I remember, just going back this time and now with my kids, I went to a home that literally still had a lot of the same pictures that I had growing up, a lot of the same, cutlery, plates, and much of it I didn't pay attention to beforehand, but now there was a different essence to it. And it felt like, of course, it felt like home. This was one of the places we went, we would go to every Tuesday, Thursday. We would visit with my aunt and uncle because my grandmother lived in the same building, and my Lola lived in the same building, and we actually lived, across the street in another building 2 blocks away. So we all lived very, very close. And I just noticed some of the subtleties that, you know, uh, these two people, my aunt and uncle, my Bhua and my uncle Glenn, were just not the same as I picture them, or when they come to Texas, when they come to visit, or if they come traveling with us. That there is a sense of, this idea of aging, and this idea of, you know not to say a cognitive decline or mental decline. And I know, maybe some of you listening to this are kind of like, actually no, I notice my elderly parents are going through a decline. And or maybe you are part of the few that are actually caregivers. And I wanted to also bring this up because there's a Pew Research study, and I'll link it in the show notes, where roughly 2/3 of adult children have responsibilities for their caretakers or elderly parents, meaning that they are caregivers or they provide some sort of care to their elderly parent. That is 66%, 2/3. That is crazy. And, the fact that we are, having fights with them about them not uh, wishing well on us if we want to get a divorce, or if we are not going to go into the career that they want us to go into, or the fact that uh, they don't like our certain lifestyle decisions, or if we want to move across the country or cross another side of the world. 2/3 of you listening to this are actually also in that bucket of actually taking care of your elderly parent, where the tables are kind of starting to turn. And so my question is, if there is, let's just say, maybe a limited time left, if, let's just say, there, and I don't want to, wish that on anyone, because I of course I've seen a lot of those, that loss, and I know that for me, I have really chose to view certain things as kind of like, oh, okay, that's what they say. I'm not gonna, it's not gonna enter my auric field. It's not gonna enter my full energy body. And I'm not gonna let that in. And this has been a muscle that I've been cultivating for years. And I think it's actually because there have been moments where I had prayed every day that my mom, who was dying of cancer, wouldn't leave us early, that she would live to see me go to prom as a junior in high school. I would pray every day that my dad, that there would be some miracle that would help heal my dad, that he would see me off to finish college. And those things never happened. And when it comes to then the turning tides in our relationships, and as our elderly parents are changing ship, they are aging. Sometimes we can see it visibly. Sometimes, it's the memes that we see, that they're getting irritated about things and they start yelling about things, or they are hoarding things, or they forget their passwords, and we see all these memes on social media, and you laugh and it's funny, um, because maybe when you FaceTime them, they're literally showing you part of their forehead or part of their nostril. And I make a joke out of it because, of course, it is funny, but there's also some truth to it, right? And on the one hand, it could be that maybe they're just not savvy with social, which is actually true. But then on the other hand, when I actually visited, in this instance, from personal experience, my aunt and uncle, I did see a difference. I saw a very big difference in the way they live, and to actually see and how it hit different, that who knows, um where we are all at in that journey, and to get triggered or, get triggered when we're in this dynamic of, role reversal when I'm back in their home, in the home that I saw them when I was a young girl, versus when they're coming to my home in a very new and different environment where I'm actually, in control. You tend to there is a perspective change and there is a perspective shift. And I don't know who needs to hear this today, but it just made me there was a sense of sadness. I did feel sad that maybe we may not have as much time. Or it was also, I want to make the most out of the time that we have, whatever it may be, because how often do I actually and will I actually go back to Chicago? Now that I have my kids have, all their little responsibilities and we want to be able to see different parts of the world, I might not go back as much. And so and we've had this conversation, with my husband as well. How often are we going to actually go to India, and how often are they going to come here? And so if we're actually only seeing our family members once a year or twice a year maybe, how are we going to relate to them? And is it okay to kind of hold grudges? Is it okay to take things personally when you know you only have limited time with them anyways? And, to make those moments, those smaller moments, worthwhile. And this was just it dawned on me because I ended up making, my aunt's dreams come true to see her first granddaughter get married in India. And I knew that, she wasn't going to be able to travel, by herself. She has a cane. And while she is very independent, and I thought this was going to be a fun girls' trip, even though I vividly remember when we were to travel, even before I had children, there, because we are such strong personalities, we would definitely get into fights. And this time it would be different. And so I was able to surprise her and take her to India. Of course, I mean, we went to Delhi for 3 days, and I then took her to Dubai on the way back. And it was such a beautiful trip. It was very, very short. It was super hectic. And of course, did triggers come to the surface? Absolutely. Did we get into a fight? Absolutely. And what was different this time in our repair? And, now this has taken many, many, many years. I want to say over a decade of practicing this, because there was a time where, my bonus mama, my Bhua, and I did not talk right before I actually left my very first marriage haphazardly in the middle of the night. As you can imagine, she did not approve of this relationship. In fact, did not like the person that I was with at the time. And I was also very opinionated. We butted heads a lot. And, growing up, it was as if I felt that I was kind of this, black sheep, rainbow sheep. And I was this bad kid because I wanted this freedom and I wanted this liberation. And so I felt that I needed to overprove, work hard, overcompensate, get the straight A's, prove to the entire community that I was not this bad girl, quote, air quotes, by the way. And, you know, it was only until after everything came crumbling down, this idea of this first marriage going completely into, shit, I had to really uh, make some vast moves uh, to actually save my life and get out of this very toxic situation. And the tides turned when I actually let her in. And I thought she was going to say, I told you so. I thought she was going to get, super angry. She was the first person that I called to let in and say, I need help. And, coming back to this notion, our elders just want to be needed. They want to know that their wisdom, because they are older, is valid, that you, whether or not you take advice from them, that that perhaps they want to have maybe some sort of relationship with you in their life. And it's interesting because now, many, many years later, she will ask for advice, or she will say, hey, is this a good supplement to take, or something like that, or she'll send me articles, what do you think about this? And that never used to happen, ever. It would be like, I'm your elder and you have to listen to whatever I have to say, and etc. And so if you are in that boat where you are trying to break news to your 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 elderly parents, aunts, uncles, people that you actually admire, respect, and you're afraid of what they are going to say, see if you can have a brave conversation around it. And I will link a few episodes where I actually talk about how to have a brave conversation. And it's not going to be easy. And it's not something that happens right away. In fact, I actually remember interviewing one of our favorite guests, actually, Angelia Trinidad, and I'll link her show in the show notes. And she kind of gave an interesting example of, her coming out to her Filipino parents for the very, very first time, and them being in this very religious kind of group, and she was so afraid of what they would say and how they would react and how they would respond. And when she did, she said, if I was living with this for most of my life, and they are thinking one way about you most of their life, and you expect them to change after one conversation, how do you think that's going to go? And so to be really mindful of the expectations that we also put on our relatives, that maybe it's not going to just be the one conversation. I mean, if you're dropping something really big and you expect them to be on your side right away, it's going to take time. And if you're in different parts of the world, Asia, the Middle East, where, we come from this collectivist cultures, the East, basically in general, where some of the things that we do, they think that they don't even know what we do, and they can't even fathom it. And those conversations then become, tinier, tinier kind of uh, snippets of an entryway point into your life, where maybe it doesn't have to be tomorrow's conversation. Maybe you're priming them for the next year. And uh, this is a great example, because I remember when it was time for me to break the news that I wanted to sell my practice. And some of you might argue and say, why would you care what everybody else thought of you selling your practice? Well, to break the news to your family, especially when everyone's lauding you and applauding you for, having your 7-figure dental practice and being one of the first ones in your class to have a practice and it be successful, and to actually have other doctors working under you, and to it be standalone, and you can actually go off and do other things, because that's what I was doing. I was only there twice a month at that point, and I had bought the building at this point, and I had expanded and done renovations to expand even more operatories there. And I said, all right, been there, done that. Let's go. Let me wash my hands of it and let me move on. And that was the thing. And it was so hard for my family to grasp, because we had just did a ribbon cutting ceremony with the mayor, and it was like a whole big situation. And they were like, you want to throw this away for what? They could not believe it. I remember one of my aunts, my great aunt, my Lola's sister, she was crying and she was like, "But you went to school for all of this. How could you give it away? Are you going into a cult? What are you doing?" And she was so, it was like I let her down. And then when I wrote my first book, she refused to read it, refused to even tell people that I was an author, as if that was less than, all the other things that I had done. And I had to rectify that those things were not for anybody else but for me. And this was me individuating. This was me literally going on my own path, whatever path that meant. And yes, in our hero's journey, we will have to step into the jungle. We will have to step into what is uncomfortable. We will have to step into the things that may piss other people off in order to find our true north, in order to find ourselves. And is it a bad thing? Like I shared, my aunt and I, my Bhua and I, we came back. She was there for me during some of my most rock bottom moments where I was so afraid to literally tell the world. She became my cheerleader in so many ways because I honestly let her in. I became that person that literally allowed her to, rub my hair and be the one to catch my tears. And this was somebody that I was so terrified about for so many years. And I'm not going to say that this may be the same relationship with you or, in your scenario, but I know that it can change if you actually give it a chance. And for those that, maybe the path is maybe not to actually repair to that point. The path is, can you accept them for who they are? And I know my aunt has narcissistic tendencies. I've grown up with that. This is not a thing that I am a foreigner to. And can you love them from afar? Can you have your own protective shield? And I talk about this and That Suck Now What, of how to actually protect your energy around these people that may not agree with your decision making, that may not agree with your politics, that may not agree with your way of living, that may not agree with your lifestyle, that may not agree with your partner, but that you can love them from afar. Because maybe at the end of the day, how often are you actually seeing them? And even for my aunt, my Lola sister had one idea in her mind about me being this amazing dentist for years and years and years, and all of us having to grieve this loss of that. But the same thing with my aunt, and she had to literally say, you know what, and this was the biggest growth. And I'm not saying this would happen for anybody, but this is if you are walking your truth, this is if you are embodying your own beliefs and you're walking the walk, you're walking the talk. You're not needing validation from anyone else. You're not needing that validation from your elders anymore. You're respecting them if that is important to you, but you're still listening to the tunes of your voice and you beating the sound of your own drum, that you can say, hey, I'm going to actually change careers. I'm going to do what makes my heart come alive, whatever those things are. And you can appreciate their noise, but not take it internally. That would be golden, because they can be and have their own experience, and you can still live your truth, live your dharma, live whatever your next soul's calling or your next soul's evolution is, without taking those things personally. And now, even if having the fights, that we had in India, I actually had to say to my aunt one time, I'm like, okay, you're acting like one of my children. I don't know what's happening, but can we have a conversation about this? And it was interesting because that's kind of where I saw some of her frustrations now that she is, she's in her 70s. And there were frustrations of her not wanting to admit where she didn't feel as confident in, walking to certain places and doing certain things. And there was another sense of like, oh, wow, this is like a turning point. And am I going to get mad at her about this or take personally that she was just yelling at me for, something really trivial? And it could have spiraled into our dynamic of me being 14 and her being, whatever, in her late 40s then. And, or what, whatever the age difference was. Or I could meet her where she was at energetically and I could see her inner child in pain and her frustration because she's been so independent her entire life, not wanting to depend on anyone. And now she needed to ask for help or she couldn't go at the same pace as she was used to. So, my invitation here is to pay attention to those signs and to come from a place of compassion, to come from a place of that perspective. Again, this blew my mind because I hadn't been back to that same house in a year and a half. And so it's easy when you are taking people out of their environment and you're seeing them, only at holidays and things like that. But I was able to spend a week back in Chicago and I would see the day to day. And, my heart it gave out because I could see there is a difference. And whether it is the grieving of maybe this childhood house that I thought that and actually I don't even know what expectations I had, but the fact that we are entering a stage where perhaps maybe the roles are reversed. And so can you operate from more of a sense of compassion than judgment or irritation or asking a different question for yourself, that you maybe can have these experiences and maybe, just maybe, it may give you the inner wisdom that you can enjoy the company of your elderly parents in whatever way, shape, form, time frame that they have, because it is precious. And those are, the moments. And I go back to this book, The Five Regrets of the Dying. And one of the regrets is I wish I spent time with people, the I wish I would spend more time with the people that I loved. And we'll link that book in the show notes, The Five Regrets of the Dying. And if I were to give you, yes, they are going to have their 2 cents. They are going to have their own opinions. And many times those opinions have made you who you are today. To take what you want out of that or to leave it fully, to have your own energetic bubble around you, and to know that they're just coming from their own path, that it's not going to always agree or be what you see in the world. And it shouldn't, because you're going to have your own experience. And I would challenge anybody that thinks that, oh, well, I really want them to like what I'm doing. I really want them to appreciate what I have done. Why do you need that validation? Can you give it to yourself in some way? The things that you are searching outside of yourself to hear, oh, I'm proud of you. And by the way, this time she did say, I'm proud of you. She saw me inside, one of this magazine, because I'm doing a retreat at the Art of Living Center in at the end of April. And there's this magazine that I was in, and she, she thought it was like the biggest thing. And I'm like, all right, okay, it was just a pamphlet, but she thought it was the biggest thing. And she said, "Hey, Neeta, I'm really proud of you." And I was like, "Oh, okay, I'm gonna grab that nugget. Sure, I'm gonna put that in the back of my pocket." But did I need that? No. Was it the cherry on top? It was sweet. And to let there was a repair the next day after our 3-day adventure, which was so fun. It was so amazing to see her interact with the next generation and to have that glow on her face that, like, okay, I was there. And Indian weddings are such a big deal in terms of tradition, rituals, and being able to give back. And it was so beautiful to see so many generations together. But she actually apologized. She said, "I'm sorry for yelling at you. My arthritis was acting up." And I'm like, yeah, I knew that wasn't her. I'm like, what is going on? But the fact that she could actually apologize was huge. And that is a truth. That is a testament that for years and years and years and years, you are showing your true self. You are embodying your truest essence, no matter what, unapologetically, in the way you're living your life, in the articles that you're sharing, in the podcasts that you're sharing, in the episodes that you're sharing. And maybe they come along for the ride, and maybe they don't. And maybe one day they might surprise you and, start doing their own research, or maybe you realize that they are curious at the same things that you are, or maybe they're not. But oftentimes they may not understand what you're doing or who you're becoming, but it's, of course, in our actions and it's in our essence. And if we are being brave to call these things forward within ourselves, to check in and to tune in and to tap into our own awareness of, did I really need that validation? What am I actually doing this for? Who is this really for? Is this for me? Then maybe we can accept the disagreements, that it's not going to be all roses and rainbows, and that's okay. And for a little bit of time, we may have to distance ourselves from relatives so that we can have that space and that energetic space sometimes, and that the timing heals. But can you give it that reverence? Can you give it that space? So as I leave that for you today, and hopefully if this episode resonates with you, if there's somebody that really needs to hear this today, I would hope that you can share this episode with them, share this with a friend, with a family member, maybe have a discussion. How have these relationships shifted, and what's yours to carry and what's not yours to carry? I would love to hear and continue this conversation on Instagram. You can tag us, follow us at The Brave Table, follow me at Neeta Bhushan. And I would love to hear your stories. If this impacted you in any way, I would love, love, love if you would give us a 5-star review. It's the only way that we can grow our community. And you have no idea how that helps us so much. And when you do, or if you just hit the follow button on Spotify and iTunes, but if you screenshot your review to support@globalgrit.co, that is support@globalgrit.co, we will send you a free gift. So until next time, don't forget to be just a little bit more brave. Thank you so, so much for tuning in, and I will see you soon.
To really dig deep, to be able to figure out where it hurts and press it and tell that story. So there's a lot of very raw emotion there. I think this story was always in me. It's such a personal one, but I think the best art is personal. Like, where would we be without Taylor Swift's heartbreaks? And, the best art is personal.